This is a Rough Rider half hawk in cinnamon bone stag. Isn't that just gorgeous? Really nice walk and talk. Doesn't hit the half stop super hard, but it does have some snap. There you can see it says Rough Rider and carbon steel. These are, I believe, T10 carbon steel. It's pretty similar to Case's 1095. It holds a good edge. This is good stuff. Isn't that a beautiful knife? Well, what I want to do today is put an initial edge on it. You bring you over here so you can see the stone. And this is a full flat grind, and this is a good example where if you use some type of an edge guide, say you wanted to put, I don't know, 14, 15 degree edge on this thing, you can't use an edge guide like what's built into here. This is set at 20 degrees. First of all, it doesn't work. And if this is ground at 3 degrees per side or so, you add that to your angle. So instead of 20 degrees, you'll be sharpening at 23 degrees per side or 46 degrees inclusive. And that will give you a really obtuse edge. So in order to get about the right angle on it, I'm going to use a 12 degree sharpening guide. And if I put the knife on here and run it down, that is about right. It's going to be hard for you to see through the camera, but that is about the right angle. So because of this full flat and we have an angle here, a 12 degree edge guide is the right one to use. We have no flat to register off of. If you had a flat, like right here on the tang, it's flat. If you had a, say, a saber grind and you had a flat up here that you could register off of, then the angles would be correct. So you have to take that into account. So I'm going to put this on the stone. And just wrap this rubber band around here. I haven't tried this yet, but I think it'll still fit in my holder. All right. There we go. So now what I'm going to do to start this, I'm going to rest the knife against the edge guide. Then I'm going to come down onto the stone. That gives me my angle. And I'm just going to work that same angle. And you can go back if you need to re-register. And that'll make it easy to have a consistent angle so your edge doesn't get really wonky. So just put it down on the guide, slide down to the stone, maintain that same angle. Double check it, reset. Because this grind on this was a little bit funky. But I think you can see I'm about on the right angle. I'm getting that whole edge bevel. So that 12 degree one was the same angle that was there already. I'm going to do just a few more passes because I still have factory grind lines here. I still have some factory grind lines up here by the tip, but I'm going to stop there because the bevel on this side is quite a bit smaller. I'm going to work on this one for a little while. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide this guide over to the other side of the stone, because unlike most people, I also sharpen left-handed. I sharpen one side right-handed and I sharpen the other side left-handed. Now all you would have to do is you could flip the stone around this way if you wanted to go like this and use your right hand for both. So again, I'm going to register off the guide and then come down onto the stone and just maintain that angle. Check it again as necessary. And it won't take you too long until you start remembering these angles. And you don't have to put a ton of pressure on these diamond stones. You want to keep it a little bit on the light side because diamonds will wear, not really wear, but they shatter if you apply too much pressure. They're very brittle and they don't hold up to shock. So let the stone do the work. Because you don't want to destroy your expensive bench stones. These things should last for years and years. See, I'm right there still at that same edge angle. Double checking. See, one thing is, it's not hard to hold an edge angle. The hard part, what's tricky about sharpening freehand, is knowing what the angle is. This takes the guesswork out of it. So what you can do is you can write down, if you have specific knives, which angle you use with each knife. You know what? It's time to go to the coarser stone. This is taking too long. Set the angle, come down to the stone. Can you hear the difference in this one? These things will work on a small stone and they'll work on the big stone like this. Yep, this is taking it down a little faster. It's amazing how inconsistent these factory grinds are on these knives. Wow. Got to get down here a little more. Needs more at the tip and more down here at the base. It may take a few sharpenings. I don't know how much metal I want to remove off this just at one time. Slowly getting there. You can see it's wavy. I have it sharpened in here, but the edge still is factory. It's wildly inconsistent. Let's do a little bit on the other side. I'm not going on each side until I raise a burr right now. Right now I'm just trying to straighten this edge out a little bit because it's so wonky. And a lot of times on these traditional knives, when the grinds aren't good, because let's face it, these are low price knives. This knife was around $15. Something's got to give. It can't be all the way around a finely finished product. I mean, they did a beautiful job on the handle. The springs are good. I mean, it's even flush here in the open position. Half stop position, the spring is proud, but the spring is flush again on the closed position. If you look at the fit and finish on here, it's just beautiful. There's no gaps in this knife. There's no problems. Good pull, good spring tension. Just beautiful knife. But the grind isn't the best. Got to go a little more up here towards the tip. And then we need more down here still on that side. And on the side we're working on right now, I need to go a little bit more down in here. So let's put it back on the guide, bring it down to the stone, and maintain the angle. Double check, it's perfect. Like I said, it's easy. Once you have an angle set, your hand can maintain that angle without too much difficulty. It's once you take the knife off and you reset it to find exactly where you were, go back to your guide, bring it down, and you're good to go. A little bit more in here, but you can see how much it varies. It's crazy. Now I'm going to work the whole blade rather than just concentrating on the spot. See if that'll even it out just a little bit more. Okay, that's getting there. Now it's time to go back to the other side. So I'm going to slide my guide over to the other side of the stone. Like I said, if you can't sharpen left-handed, all you have to do is turn it over around. When you slide it to that other side, you can register off here and go to town. This is a DMT black. I'm pretty sure this is 220 grit. This is a pretty coarse stone. You can hear that. It's not perfect because the grind isn't perfect. The way the blade is ground isn't perfect. There are different thicknesses behind the edge. I can feel how it varies. It's thinner by the edge right here by the choil, and it gets thicker. It's pretty thick in here, and it's thick by the tip. So that's why you'll see a little bit of waviness. You're never going to get this absolutely 100% perfect, but you'll get it close. And this is off to a good start. I need to do a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the other side, so I'll slide my edge guide over. Register off the guide, Come down to the stone. And work it, maintaining that angle. See, if I go back up, I'm right on there. Check it, perfect. A lot of people use two hands, which you can use two hands. Matter of fact, one trick, if there's a particular spot on the blade that you want to remove more metal from, if you put some pressure on that spot, you'll remove more metal there. I use that trick when I'm regrinding blades with the belt sander. Wherever I want the metal to be removed, that's where I put a little bit of pressure. It'll work on the stones, just slower. Okay, few more passes on this side. It's looking a lot better than it was. Still, I can see a little bit of factory grind right in this area. So I'm not quite to the apex there. Okay, let's go back to the other side. Let's make some more passes over here. Slide our guide over. Register off of it. You stop, check it, reset. If you think you've moved even the slightest bit, stop, check, reset, and go at it again. I can see I still need more up in this area here. I don't know how well that comes out on the camera. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. So we'll just work up towards the tip. Again, stop, reset, come down. That is still not quite there. I still got a little ways to go. You know, somebody just takes these knives, and see, this is a belt sander, and they just run these across the belt, and they roughly put an edge on there. There's no solid angle held. There's no consistency in it. And you end up with these really wonky edges. And I'm also lowering the angle a little bit. So there's 12. You figure maybe this is a 3-degree grind, I'm guessing. So 12, 15. So this is going to be about a 30-degree edge. So because that bevel is getting wide, you can tell it's thick. It's thick here behind the edge. And it's not consistent. It's not a consistent thickness down the entire length of the edge. It changes, and you'll get this little bit of waviness in there. We still have a ways to go with the tip. So even on a coarse 220 grit stone like this, it can take a little bit of time to reprofile a knife. And this is only carbon steel. If this was S90V or even M390, I made a video, probably 8 or 9 months ago, where I actually reprofiled the blades on a Lion Steel Best Man. And just on one blade, the Lion Steel Best Man, and I has 2 blades, but just one of those blades on this stone right here, 220 grit, it took 45 minutes to reprofile that edge down to, about the 14 degrees per side that I like. So it can be time consuming. It's not that people say steels are hard to sharpen or easy to sharpen. It's not so much that they're hard or easy. The technique is the same. It's the amount of time that it takes. There's steels that are very wear resistant, take a long time to sharpen, even on a coarse diamond. So that's when we refer to as hard to sharpen. That's really what is meant. It's not actually hard, like I said, because it's the same process, just 5 times longer. It's getting close. It's still not there though. Pretty soon I'm going to have to go back to this side because I don't want the bevel on one side to get a lot bigger than the bevel on the other side. I want them to stay about even. I can still see up in here, we're not there yet. But I'm going to move back to the other side for a little while. I have to hit the apex on both sides while keeping the bevel about the same size on each side. I don't want it to be taller on one side and shorter on the other. If they're both the same size, that means the edge is perfectly centered. And that's what the goal is. So even if I've hit the apex on this side, I still have to keep removing metal from this side to keep the bevels of equal size. I'm going to go 15 per side. 15 passes per side. I'm not talking degrees right now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The bevel's getting pretty big, isn't it? All right, now let's move over and do 15 passes on the other side. 10, 15. Go 15 more on each side. I'm looking to hit the apex now. Move over and do 15 on the other side. I think I'm about where I want to be. We're going to move to a finer stone. I have the blue stone set up, which is 325 grit. Before we go on to this, let's just do a little check. It's rough, but it cuts, but that's off of a 220 grit stone. We're going to use this to take that scratch pattern out. Passes. Can you see the difference already between that side and this side? This side is still pretty coarse. This is getting refined. Let's move over and do some passes on the other side. I'll tell you what though, I'm impressed with the hardness of the steel. Rough Ryder is not running these things soft. This knife should hold a pretty good edge when it's done. It's getting to be a pretty big bevel. Still a little bit of catch in this area here. So we don't quite have it yet. Let's move back to the other side. Working it in the area where that catches. Actually, I'm going to try putting this in the middle. That's good enough for me. I don't have to slide it from side to side. You wonder why these knives are so cheap? Well, there you have it. You can't expect them to do a high level of precision for a low price. Something has to give. They put the knife together pretty decent. They have to skimp somewhere. They have to cut costs. And those costs come in the fit and finish. You don't have consistent grinds in the blades, and definitely not on the bevels, and it's really hard to try and get a bevel that looks decent when the grind on the blade itself isn't consistent. You put a low edge angle on one of these cheap knives and it really shows off the flaws. Okay, let's go a few strokes back and forth. A little bit lighter. Give you a better look at this. You can see, even though it's big there, it's pretty consistent. Same thing on this side. You can see how it's wider here. That's due to, like I said, the difference in how thick this knife is behind the edge. You know, you can feel it thin, very thin here. It's thick at the tip, but there's some spots in here where it gets a little thinner and a little thicker. So that's what it looks like off 325 grit. And this is ready to move on to the 600 grit. So these things have worked out great. This works better than I thought. I was sliding it back and forth. I scrapped that and I just put it in the middle, even though this is a fairly wide stone. These are 2 5/8 inches by 8 inches. I found I can just put it right in the middle and call it good. If you have a smaller stone, you definitely won't have a problem just leaving it in the middle. Yeah, I went ahead and used a 600 grit stone with the angle guide, and let's see where we're at now. Can you hear now how nice and smooth that cut is? Beautiful. That's a good enough edge for this knife. That's all I'm going to do to it right now. And let me zoom in a little bit, give you a better look. You can see exactly where it is. As a freehand edge on a knife that had a completely wacky bevel, and you can still see it's not right. You can still see how it dips down in here due to the thickness in the steel. But you can get a nice consistent angle, and you can get a good sharp working edge without too much trouble. Just takes a little bit of time when you're doing it by hand. This could use a few more passes on the 600 grit and then maybe a little bit of stropping, but what's wrong with that? Look how clean that cut is. And you can tell by the sound it's very smooth. That's pretty sharp. So I hope this, I was going to say quick look, but this turned into a pretty long look with how serious of a reprofile this blade needed and how much time it needed on the coarser stones. That's not the norm, but you buy these $15 knives and you have to spend a bit of time on it. So I hope you've not been too bored and enjoyed this look at using these edge guides. Before posting the video, I wanted to show you exactly what I was experiencing with this knife. While I was sharpening, I told you I could feel that the edge was really thick. It's really thick behind the edge, which you can see on a 15-degree bevel, or approximately 15 degrees per side. The bevel should not be that tall. Just by comparison, this is a knife that I had made. And you see that bevel? That's a 15-degree per side bevel. So just as a comparison, you can see how small that bevel is. And I left it be just a little bit thicker at the tip, just so it's a little more stout, since this is an outdoors hard use knife. Now let's take and measure. Let me zero this out, and we'll see what it is behind the edge. We'll go all the way towards the tang here. You've got 33 thousandths. That's here at the tang where the knife is thinner. You can feel like it's thicker as it goes out. And there's a spot right here where you can see it dips down that has some irregularities in it. Let's measure the thickness behind the edge right there. 41 thousandths. That's crazy. That is crazy thick. And let's measure it at the tip. 30 thousandths. So you can see the wild variation in the thickness of this blade behind the edge. And that is why it looks the way it is when it's sharpening. But overall, it turned out good, and you have to thin a knife like this out. It's not going to slice if you don't thin it out. It's too thick. Really what this knife needs is a regrind, and one of these days I may just regrind this knife. I'll put it on my belt sander and take quite a bit of material off and thin that edge out. Because I can thin that edge out, and I can use the apex as a guide and just go by eye, so I have a nice, small, even bevel. Now, let's take a look at the knife that I made. I might have to zoom out just a little bit to get this in the picture. This is one of my favorite knives. I made this knife specifically for me. It fits my hand perfectly. It's nice and big. We have just over 4.5-inch blade. See, about close to 4.5 inches inside measurement here, and 5-inch overall handle. You can also see it's pretty thick. We're at about 15/16 of an inch thick there. So if you have a large hand, this is absolutely perfect. You can use this for a long time without any fatigue. But we're here to measure the thickness behind the edge. Oops, slid off. I'm having a hard time. I'm going to have to do this, pull it out from underneath the camera. I can't see to get this on here. Okay, there we go. I'm right behind the edge. Now I'm at 15 thousandths. Okay, right there. Again, I'm at 15 thousandths. Now I let it get a little bit thicker up by the tip. I didn't grind the tip quite as thin. So let me measure up by the tip. 24 thousandths, which is pretty thick in my book. Okay, 24 thousandths right there. But that's for using this as a woods knife. I wanted a nice stout tip on it, so if you put pressure on this tip for doing bushcraft tasks, you're not going to pop and break that tip off. But for the most part, the knife is all of 15 thousandths, and then gradually thickening out right at the very tip for strength. My opinion, this is how a knife should be done. Should be nice and thin behind the edge for slicing ability, and if all you're going to do is slice, you keep it thin throughout the tip. But since this is a general purpose knife, I call this my woodsman. So you can take this camping, you can do bushcraft. It's a good hunting knife. It's an all-around woods knife, and that's why the grind is the way it is. And by the way, this one is just sharpened completely freehand. So, give you one last look. At least you can see the bevel that I put on, the angle is consistent, and that's what those guides will let you do. Alright, this video is long enough, so I'm going to let you go, and we'll see you next time.